Hey, can I help you? No, I'm good. Hey, yeah. What the hell,
They were the wildest crew on television, a husband, a wife, and a giant of a best friend, repossessing cars from people who absolutely did not want to give them up. For 4 electrifying seasons, Lizard Lick Towing had millions of Americans glued to their screens, convinced they were watching something raw and real. But the truth about what was actually happening behind the cameras and what happened after the cameras stopped rolling is a story that nobody fully told. So what happened behind the scenes? And was Lizard Lick Towing completely real? Join us as we get into it. The town with the name nobody could forget. There is a real place called Lizard Lick. It sits just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, near the small suburb of Wendell. And it is exactly the kind of tiny, overlooked American community where extraordinary things happen quietly for decades before a television camera ever shows up. The name alone was enough to make people stop scrolling. Lizard Lick. It sounds made up. It sounds like the punchline of a joke someone told at a truck stop in 1987. But it is completely real. And so is the towing company that bears its name. Ronnie Shirley started Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery in the spring of 1998. He had been a farm boy from Johnston County, raised on plowing fields and tending livestock. He had played college football before an injury ended that chapter. He had worked his way through car dealerships, climbing from sales to finance departments, but none of it quite fit. He needed something with more adrenaline, more mental challenge, more of that electric unpredictability that makes a person feel alive. So he bought a single 1996 rollback truck, armed himself with what he described as a plethora of hope and determination, and entered the world of repossession. In 10 years, that one truck became 20. That one man became 15 employees. Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery grew into a legitimate, thriving business with drivers, mechanics, security staff, and a reputation in the area for getting the job done no matter how difficult the circumstances. Ronnie had built something real, something he was proud of. And then a television network came calling, and everything changed. The whole TV circus started back in August 2008 when some lonely cameraman showed up to scout the place for a single day. He expected to find greasy guys in overalls, but instead, he found Amy Shirley. She was basically a human Swiss Army knife, a world record powerlifter, a mortician, and a repo business owner all at once. The network executives apparently lost their minds when they saw her, probably smelling the piles of money they could make off that kind of crazy resume. They didn't even wait a week before drawing up a contract. Just like that, a random towing yard in North Carolina was on the fast track to becoming a household name. But fame, as the Shirley family would learn over the years that followed, is a beast that doesn't always come in peace. And the story of how this small North Carolina business ended up on national television and what it cost them was far more complicated than any single episode of the show ever revealed. The rise from one truck to national television. The show didn't even have its own name at the start. It began as a tiny slice of a true TV series called All Worked Up, which ran from 2009 to 2011. That show was basically a montage of different people getting yelled at while trying to do their jobs. Ronnie and Amy were just part of the rotation along with Bobby Brantley. Bobby had the most ridiculous backstory of the bunch, since he started as a guy who got his truck towed by Ronnie and ended up working off his debt at the yard. The trio was so chaotic on camera that the network decided to give them their own stage. It was a move that flipped their lives upside down, for better or worse. The audience couldn't get enough of the disaster. People tuned in just to watch Ronnie and Bobby go on repo runs that inevitably turned into a circus of screaming matches and terrible fistfights. The show basically survived on a diet of absurd Southern one-liners that felt like they were written by someone who had spent way too much time in a dive bar. While the guys were out making a mess, Amy stayed at the office to keep the lights on, occasionally jumping into the brawls herself, just to prove she could. Then there was Bobby, who was basically a giant human teddy bear with a temper. He became the fan favorite because people loved seeing a guy that big look like he actually cared about the cars he was dragging away. Not everyone in town was thrilled to have a TV crew living in their backyard. A bunch of local business owners started complaining because the show attracted a special kind of chaos. Apparently, fans would show up at nearby shops looking for a fight, failing to realize that what they saw on TV wasn't exactly real life. People couldn't tell where the acting ended and the actual towing began. Because behind every explosive repo scene, behind every perfectly timed punch, and every miraculous camera angle, there was a question the show's producers had never wanted viewers to ask out loud. The big lie. Was any of it actually real? Let's be honest about something. When you watch a man get chased down a dirt road by 6 angry customers, and the cameraman filming the scene somehow never gets touched, never gets yelled at, never even gets acknowledged by anyone in the scene, something is off. When every single repo run ends in a dramatic fight, when every single fight ends with Ronnie or Bobby escaping at the last possible second, and when every single episode follows a structure so clean it could have been written in a writer's room, well, that is because, in all likelihood, it was. True TV's official position on its programming was deliberately crafted to blur the line between scripted and real. The network insisted it did not produce reality television. Instead, it used the phrase actuality, claiming its shows featured real-life situations rather than scripted drama. That distinction, intentionally convoluted, gave the network plausible deniability while still presenting clearly staged material as if it were genuine. A True TV executive was quoted as saying, "The network's goal was programming that was different from typical reality shows." What they meant, though many viewers did not realize it at the time, was that the scenarios were rehearsed, the conflicts were arranged, and the outcomes were known before filming began. The Lizard Lick Towing Company itself is completely real. Ronnie and Amy are real. Bobby is real. The employees are real. But the scenes viewers watched on television were, according to multiple sources, with knowledge of the production, scripted reenactments loosely inspired by actual situations the company had encountered. The customers who showed up to fight were allegedly actors or paid participants. The confrontations were allegedly choreographed. The drama was allegedly amplified far beyond anything that would naturally occur during a standard repossession. When word of this began circulating on message boards, in reviews, and in conversations among people who lived near Lizard Lick and had watched the filming happen, the backlash was significant. Critics accused the show of deceiving its audience. Viewers who had proudly defended the show's authenticity felt embarrassed. Some longtime fans felt betrayed. The cracks in the foundation were beginning to show, and no amount of Southern charm could paper over them entirely. By the time the 3rd and 4th seasons aired, reviews had begun to turn. Critics noted that the show felt too scripted, that the personalities felt forced, that the drama felt less organic and more manufactured with each passing episode. The audiences who had loved the show in its early seasons started drifting away, sensing that they were watching performance rather than reality, even if they could not quite articulate why. And then, after 4 seasons and 91 episodes, True TV made the decision that nobody who loved the show wanted to hear, and the reason why may be darker and more complicated than a simple ratings story. The Cancellation, what True TV never explained. Lizard Lick Towing took its final bow on August 18, 2014, and True TV handled the breakup like a toxic ex. The network axed the show after 4 seasons without a single word of explanation. There was no big goodbye, no tribute special, and zero closure for the cast or the people watching at home. The cameras just stopped rolling. One day, the Shirleys and Brantleys were cable TV stars, and the next, they were just back in North Carolina towing cars in total silence. The spotlight turned off, the business stayed open, and the rest of the world just kept moving. Fans flooded message boards and petition sites demanding answers and a renewal. Comment sections were filled with messages from viewers who felt the show had ended too soon, who wanted more seasons, and who insisted the series had been the best thing on television. Some blamed the cancellation on the fake controversy, arguing that once audiences understood the show was scripted, the magic was broken. Others pointed to shifting trends in reality television, suggesting that True TV was moving away from Southern-set dramatized actuality shows and toward different programming genres. Behind the scenes, people were starting to realize the show was running on fumes. Scripted reality is a tightrope walk. It has to look real enough to trick people, but stay controlled enough to film on a schedule. By the 4th season, that act was falling apart. The situations were getting too ridiculous, the acting was getting worse, and the production team was clearly struggling to fake the same energy they had at the start. Rumor has it, the network finally realized the gimmick was dead. They figured the audience had seen enough staged parking lot brawls and decided to pull the plug before it got even more embarrassing. True TV was basically going through a midlife crisis at the time. The higher-ups decided to ditch the staged reality drama and try to be funny instead. This meant shows like Lizard Lick Towing were suddenly out of style. The network wanted real comedy, not guys getting punched in a parking lot for scripted actuality points. The trend that made the show a hit died out, and the executives quietly shut the door on the whole thing while everyone was looking the other way. Because when the cameras stopped, life did not stop, and what came next for the people of Lizard Lick Towing would test them in ways no scripted drama ever could. Life after the cameras. The cast, then and now. Ronnie Shirley never stopped working. After the show ended, he returned full-time to running Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery, serving as its director and overseeing daily operations. He also stepped into a different kind of calling, becoming the pastor of the Dirt Church Eastern Chapter, describing himself as an evangelist by grace. For a man who built a business with his hands and his grit, the spiritual turn felt natural. He had always spoken openly about faith. Now he was living it publicly in a different arena than television. Amy Shirley didn't just disappear when the cameras packed up. She stayed on as vice president, helping Ronnie run the same towing business they built from the ground up. Since she apparently didn't have enough hobbies between being a powerlifter, a mortician, and a TV star, she decided to become an author too. She put out a cookbook called Gluten-Free in Lizard Lick because nothing says North Carolina repo yard like dietary restrictions. These days, she spends her time hovering over social media to keep the fans happy and staying involved in her local community. She's still the same person, just with fewer cameramen following her to the grocery store. Bobby Brantley, the giant-hearted best friend who had become arguably the show's most beloved figure, took a more difficult path after the cameras stopped. He left Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery after the show ended, pursuing other ventures, including an acting role in a film called The Lonesome Curse in 2015. But his personal life was tested when, in 2019, he was diagnosed with a pituitary adenoma, a form of brain tumor. He underwent surgery to have it removed and retreated to Lil Ass Farms in Pilot, North Carolina, to focus on recovery with his wife Melanie and their 8 children. By all accounts, Bobby maintained the warmth and humor that made audiences love him, even through the hardest stretch of his life. The rest of the cast scattered in the ways casts do when a show ends. Big Juicy, real name Elaine McGilvery, stepped away from the spotlight and devoted herself to raising her 3 children. Crazy Dave pursued his passion for music, working on a project called the Rocky Cross Project and appearing at community events alongside Bobby. Cousin Johnny continued working at Lizard Lick. But for the Shirley family in particular, the years after the show ended would bring not just new chapters, but a grief so profound it would redefine everything, and it had nothing to do with television. Tragedy strikes that changed everything. The story hit a wall of actual tragedy on February 17, 2022. Ronnie Shirley's son, Harley Alexander Shirley, was shot outside a house in Garner, North Carolina. He was only 21. A 20-year-old woman named Sophie Hagee was caught in the crossfire too. She lived through it, but the shooting left her paralyzed. The police eventually tracked down and arrested 2 teenagers for the crime. It was a brutal wake-up call for the community and the fans. People who spent years watching Ronnie build his life and his family on screen had to watch that same family get torn apart in the local news. Ronnie wrote about Harley on social media in the hours after his son died. The words were raw, heartbroken, and deeply human. The words of a father who had just lost his boy. He wrote that Harley was at peace now, waiting on the rest of his family to arrive at those gates, and that they would always cherish the time they had together. The post was later deleted, as grief sometimes demands privacy. But the people who saw it never forgot it. A GoFundMe created for Sophie Hagee, the young woman who was paralyzed in the same shooting, raised more than $80,000 from people across the country, many of whom had never met her but were moved to give by the weight of the tragedy. The generosity was a reminder of something the show had always suggested about the Lizard Lick community, that underneath the chaos and the drama, there was genuine heart. The Shirley family did not disappear into silence after Harley's death. They grieved, as families do, and they kept going, as families do. Ronnie kept running the business. Amy kept showing up for her children, Gabe, Alex, Lexi, and Maggie. They leaned on faith, on each other, on the community that had always surrounded them. But the loss was immense, the kind of loss that reconfigures the architecture of a person's life permanently. And yet, despite everything, the cancellation, the controversy, and the tragedy, Lizard Lick Towing has refused to disappear. In fact, in some ways, it is more alive today than it has been in years. Why Lizard Lick refuses to die. It has been over 10 years since the cameras left, but Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery is still haunting the roads of North Carolina. The company website is like a digital time capsule, still claiming that characters like Cousin Johnny and Big Juicy are on the clock. Ronnie and Amy are still holding down their titles, while the trucks keep hauling away whatever isn't bolted down. The business started with one crappy truck and a lot of stubbornness, and apparently, they still haven't found a reason to quit. Every person who misses a car payment is just a new target for them to chase, and they seem perfectly happy to keep doing it until the wheels fall off. On TikTok, Lizard Lick Towing has amassed over 1 million followers, where Ronnie, Amy, and their circle share glimpses of their lives, their work, and their family. The platform has given them something the TV show never fully allowed: a version of themselves that is genuinely unscripted. Fans who grew up watching the show have found them again on social media and discovered that they like the real versions of these people even more than the television versions. There is something quietly beautiful about that. The show is basically a zombie at this point, living on through reruns and streaming services. A whole new generation of kids who weren't even alive when it premiered are finding it on Amazon and Google Play. They're falling for the same staged chaos and weirdly wholesome vibes that made the Lizard Lick crew famous in the first place. All that drama about the show being fake? Nobody actually cares anymore. Bobby Brantley continues to share his recovery journey with fans, appearing at events and maintaining the kind of open, generous spirit that made him a fan favorite. He and Crazy Dave still connect publicly. The community that formed around the show has not fully dissolved, even though the show itself is long gone. Cast members who were strangers before 2011 are now linked forever by the strange, wild experience of becoming famous together in a place called Lizard Lick, North Carolina. Should True TV bring Lizard Lick towing back, or has the real story on TikTok already replaced it? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.